Welcome to PHU classes. Today we will learn what is parasympathetic nervous system.
The nervous system is divided into the central nervous system, so the brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, which includes all the nerves that connect the central nervous system to the muscles and organs. The peripheral nervous system can be divided into the somatic nervous system, which controls voluntary movement of our skeletal muscles, and the autonomic nervous system, which is then further divided into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, and controls the involuntary movement of the smooth muscles and the glands of our organs. The sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems have opposite effects on the body. The sympathetic nervous system controls functions like increasing heart rate and blood pressure, as well as slowing digestion. And all of this maximises blood flow to the muscles and brain, and it can help you to either run away from a threat or to fight it, which is why it's also called the fight or flight response. The parasympathetic nervous system instead slows the heart rate, decreases the blood pressure, and stimulates digestion. The effects can be summarised as rest and digest. Now, neurons are the main cells of the nervous system. They're composed of a cell body, which contains all the cell's organelles, and nerve fibres, which are projections that extend out from the neuron cell body. Nerve fibres are either dendrites that receive signals from other neurons, or axons that send signals along to other neurons. Now, where two neurons come together is called a synapse, and that's where one end of an axon sends neurotransmitters to the dendrites, or directly to the cell body of the next neuron in the series. The autonomic nervous system, so both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, is made up of a relay that includes two neurons. And when there's a group of neuron cell bodies that are all next to each other, in the central nervous system, the whole thing is called a nucleus, while a group of neuron cell bodies that are located outside of the central nervous system is called a ganglion. In this video, we're just going to focus on the parasympathetic nervous system. Signals for the autonomic nervous system start in the hypothalamus, which is located at the base of the brain. Some of the hypothalamic neurons have relatively short axons that synapse with preganglionic neurons in the brainstem nuclei. The preganglionic neurons make up cranial nerve 3, which is the oculomotor nerve, cranial nerve 7, which is the facial nerve, cranial nerve 9, which is the glossopharyngeal nerve, and cranial nerve 10, which is the vagus nerve. The rest of the hypothalamic neurons have really long axons, up to 1.4 meters or 4.5 feet, and they synapse with preganglionic neuron cell bodies all the way down at the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th sacral spinal cord segments, which is S2, S3, and S4. From there, the signal travels down the preganglionic neurons and exits the brainstem or spinal cord and goes to the parasympathetic ganglia, which are a collection of postganglionic neuron cell bodies. The postganglionic neurons exit the parasympathetic ganglion and extend all the way to the target cell. The vagus nerve and the nerves that arise from the sacral spinal cord segments S2, S3 and S4, also called the pelvic splanchnic nerves, have their parasympathetic ganglia located directly in their target organs. More specifically, the vagus nerve synapses at the postganglionic ganglia on the esophagus, heart, lungs, liver, and most of the gastrointestinal tract, up to the transverse colon. The pelvic splanchnic nerves synapse at the postganglionic ganglia on the reproductive organs and the bladder. In contrast, the oculomotor, facial, and glossopharyngeal nerves synapse in cranial ganglia that aren't directly in the target organ, but are nearby. The oculomotor nerve synapses with postganglionic neurons of the ciliary ganglia, located right behind the eye, and it innervates the pupil. The facial nerve synapses with postganglionic neurons of two cranial ganglia, the pterygopalatine ganglion, which is located in the pterygopalatine fossa behind the maxilla on each side, as well as the submandibular ganglion, which is located above the submandibular salivary glands. The facial nerve innervates the sublingual and submandibular salivary glands, the lacrimal glands, and the glands in the nasal cavity. The glossopharyngeal nerve supplies the postganglionic neurons in the otic ganglia, which is located in the infratemporal fossa, situated below and medial to the zygomatic arch, and that innervates the parotid salivary gland. Now let's zoom in on the synapses of the parasympathetic nervous system. The preganglionic and postganglionic neurons release neurotransmitters, which are tiny molecules that nerve cells use to communicate with one another. They both release the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, and that's why they're called cholinergic neurons. Acetylcholine, released by preganglionic neurons, binds to nicotinic receptors on the cell membrane of postganglionic neuron cell bodies. Nicotinic receptors are ion channels that open when acetylcholine binds to them, and they allow positive ions like sodium and calcium to cross the membrane, activating the postganglionic neurons. Postganglionic neurons are also called cholinergic neurons because, like the preganglionic neurons, they also release acetylcholine. This time, however, the acetylcholine binds to muscarinic receptors on the cells of target organs. Muscarinic receptors are G-protein coupled receptors, meaning that when acetylcholine binds, they activate intracellular proteins called G-proteins. These G-proteins ultimately enable cells to change in a number of ways, and that's how the parasympathetic nervous system creates change at a cellular level. Rest and digest describes how the parasympathetic nervous system keeps body energy use as low as possible and how it stimulates activities like digestion, defecation, more commonly called pooing, and urination. It acts in the heart, slowing the heart rate and reducing cardiac output. In the gastrointestinal tract, it increases motility to stimulate digestion and defecation. In salivary glands, it increases saliva secretion to aid digestion. In the liver, it triggers glucose storage to reduce blood glucose levels, since after a meal they'll be really high. In the lungs, it causes bronchoconstriction, since in a relaxing situation our cells don't need to consume as much oxygen. In the pupils, it triggers meiosis, or constriction of the pupil, to improve close vision. In the bladder, it causes constriction of the bladder muscle, called the detrusor muscle, and this stimulates urination. And finally, in females, it stimulates secretions from the genital tract, and in males, it triggers penile erection. These organs are controlled by the sympathetic nervous system as well, with opposite effects. Okay, so as a quick recap, the parasympathetic nervous system is one of the divisions of the autonomic nervous system. The entire system is based on a preganglionic cholinergic neuron that releases acetylcholine to activate a postganglionic cholinergic neuron that releases acetylcholine to a target cell. The activity of the parasympathetic nervous system can be summarised as rest and digest because it slows the heart rate and keeps the body energy use as low as possible to stimulate organs like the gastrointestinal tract and the bladder.
Thank you.